want to find a way of ramping this up even beyond the end of the lockdown. And I don't know when the lockdown will end. Some people are saying the 16th of April. But when we announced it, I didn't say what year it will end.
Authorities will be sharing their research.
As this global pandemic reaches into a second winter, from Southern Africa comes worrying news. A discovery of a new variant of the coronavirus, very different from the types we've seen so far. And politicians there seemed resigned to its spread.
From yesterday, indication came from our scientist colleagues from the network for genomic surveillance, so that indeed they were observing what looked like a new variant. You can be rest assured, as people start to move even more over the next few weeks, this will be all over.
Scientists are concerned about this new variant because it has more than 30 mutations. It's so different. Vaccines developed to combat previous variants could be less effective against this new strain. So far in South Africa, more than 50 cases have been confirmed. It's also been identified in Botswana and Hong Kong.
This is the most concerning variant I've seen since the beginning of the pandemic, but that's partly because of what we've seen before us. But this particular virus has mutations all over its spike protein in places that enable it to avoid antibodies and our immune system, and other mutations which are able to increase how infectious that virus is.
Flights from South Africa and 5 other countries in the region will be suspended from midday tomorrow. No one knows for sure yet how transmissible the new strain is or how severe an illness it might cause, and concern of what it might be capable of has prompted the travel ban.
The early indications we have of this variant is that it may be more transmissible than the Delta variant, and the vaccines that we currently have may be less effective against it. Now, to be clear, we have not detected any of this new variant in the UK at this point in time, but we've always been clear that we will take action to protect the progress that we have made.
The government has officially declared the new strain under investigation. Its progress in the coming weeks will tell us much, but as so often in this pandemic, the world waits again to see how much of a threat and what kind of threat this virus could still pose. Geraint Vincent, News at 10.
Frustration at Johannesburg's international airport as dozens of people try to return to the United Kingdom. It comes hours after it was announced a new variant of COVID-19 had been identified in South Africa. That led to the United Kingdom announcing a new travel ban on people coming from southern African countries, including South Africa, Botswana and Zimbabwe.
It's a big inconvenience. We had our flights booked for a week's time, but we got the news from our daughter in the UK about 12:30, 1 o'clock last night, saying that the UK were going to introduce a red list.
It's unfair, it's unjustified, it's abrupt, and it's not good for tourism for South Africa. Ever since these regulations were passed last night, people are frantically trying to get back into the UK.
South African scientists say they're worried existing vaccines may not be effective and the new variant may spread easily.
The genomic surveillance in South Africa has been outstanding throughout this whole pandemic period, and that's why we've been able to identify when changes occur. The fact that we are able to identify changes quickly is good news. It's good news for the world. But we must be careful that we don't then jump to the conclusion of, well, that equals it came from here, it came from there, and it means it's this or that. We need to understand much more about this.
So far, dozens of infections have been identified in South Africa, while in Botswana, the government says the new virus was found in several foreign nationals on a diplomatic visit. While the South African government says it respects the decision taken by the UK and other countries to limit travel to and from the region, and that precautionary measures may be necessary, it says the decision is rushed.
The action of some of countries in terms of imposing travel bans and such measures are completely against the norms and standards as guided by the World Health Organization.
A possible fourth wave compounded by the new variant may further strain an already overwhelmed health system in South Africa. Famida Miller, Al Jazeera, Johannesburg.
Well, for more, I'm joined by our Foreign Affairs editor, Philip Turrell. Philip, what would greater autonomy really mean for Guadeloupe?
So what we're talking about here, Kate, is just that. We're not talking about independence for Guadeloupe or for Martinique. What the French government is saying is, after meeting with officials from Guadeloupe and Martinique, that they are willing to consider letting them have more of a say in how those territories are run. Now, just to remind our viewers, both Martinique and Guadeloupe are French overseas territories, but they depend on mainland France. They're governed from mainland France. And one of the bones in contention here is that mainland France is imposing measures on the population of Guadeloupe to begin with these COVID tests that they don't agree with, and that has led to this explosion of violence. COVID tests for medical workers and COVID tests for firefighters. So I think this is a message from the French authorities. Yes, we have heard what you're saying, and yes, we are now willing to give greater autonomy to Guadeloupe and Martinique in exchange for an end to all this unrest that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. But it doesn't mean independence. It still means that the final decisions will be made from Paris, but the officials who are elected in those two territories will have a greater say, for example, in deciding when people should be vaccinated or not and what decisions are going to be made without having to get a rubber stamp or an agreement automatically from Paris.
Is this current unrest really a sign of a greater divide, perhaps of more profound economic difficulties for the residents of both Guadeloupe and Martinique?
It certainly is, and I'll give you some figures to underline that if you like. The whole of the island's governorship has been rejected by the population there. So that's another very difficult thing that Paris has got to deal with, to try to restore confidence. That confidence has been shaken up by a scandal in the 1990s over an insecticide called chloroquine, which was kept on sale in Guadeloupe years after it was banned in the United States, and it led to cases of prostate cancer and poisoning as residues went into the land. So a lot of confidence lost with the government in France, and that's why people are reluctant to get vaccinated. On top of that, the cost of living in Guadeloupe and Martinique is far higher than in mainland France. Just for example, if you want to buy a pack of butter in Guadeloupe that comes from mainland France, here in mainland you pay €1.75. In Guadeloupe you pay €2.40. What they're saying is, well, that's fine, but our salaries are not coming along with that. Bottle of gas has gone up by 30% in the last 2 years. So people are saying they can't keep up with this increase in prices and this increase in fuel costs. So they want more action from the French authorities. There are far more people living below the poverty line in Guadeloupe and also in Martinique. 34.5% live below the poverty line. That's twice the national average on mainland France. And there's a 17.5% unemployment rate in Guadeloupe, which is far higher than in mainland France, which is only 7.8%. So people say they're fed up with electricity cuts, they're fed up with rising prices, they're fed up with having to pay more for their fuel costs. So they want a big change. And this is all boiled over with this imposition of the compulsory testing and vaccination of health workers and fire workers. The French authorities, as I was saying before, have heard this message, and what they're saying now to these health workers is, okay, we're not going to impose this vaccine on you right away. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a bit more time to think about it. We'll leave you until the end of December, and you won't lose any pay if you don't decide to do it between now and then. There will be discussions around the table to try to make you want to do those vaccines, because what we want to do is to prevent the spread of COVID. We don't want it to be spread by health workers and by firefighters, who are the ones who are most in contact with the population. That's why it's very important that you get vaccinated. And I think that is the approach that the French authorities are trying to take now, to say, we've heard the message, okay, you get greater autonomy, but on the other hand, we would like you to think about getting vaccinated, because it's in the interest not only of yourselves, but also of the greater population in both Guadeloupe and Martinique.
It's become a Saturday ritual. Protesters clogging Melbourne's streets, hitting out at vaccine mandates and the pandemic bill. The controversial legislation is set to be debated this week.
For the fifth Saturday in a row, our city streets swamped.
This is genocide, this is a bioweapon.
The government's controversial pandemic bill and vaccine mandates front and centre.
We should be able to live with freedom the way we always have.
It's just disgusting. I can't believe I haven't got a choice here.
At times a party atmosphere with drums and DJs. Among the crowd, crossbencher Catherine Cumming.
Everyone who is not vaccinated needs to go back to work right now, and that's why they're here.
During a march that looped part of the city, tram stops became vantage points as Christmas shoppers and buskers in the Bourke Street Mall were outnumbered. And on the steps of Parliament, where yesterday police played cricket with protesters, today a familiar face.
Get rid of the pandemic bill, and hopefully we can get rid of Dan Andrews as well.
The focus of their anger, the pandemic bill, is set to be debated in the upper house from Tuesday, when another large group of protesters is expected on the steps of Parliament House.
You can talk about sack Dan Andrews, but it should be arrest Dan Andrews.
The Premier, the clear target, with a common theme, a historical comparison judging his push for pandemic powers.
It's our friend from Germany, our friend from North Korea and our friend from Victoria.
Save our children! Save our children!
I've got a 12-year-old that's looking at not being able to play community sport over a mandate that's made to make parents feel guilty.
Who should be running the state?
Not Dan Andrews.
Who though?
Oh, I don't know, but not Dan Andrews.
Paul Dowsley joins us live now. And Paul, police have done something new with today's protest.
Estimating crowd numbers, Mike, for large protests like this is a notoriously imprecise science. No one can ever agree on a number, and police for some time haven't released estimates until today. And they say there were around 20,000 protesters. Some of those there that I spoke with today, the protesters, said that was well into the hundreds of thousands.
Tens of thousands of people have gathered in cities across Queensland and the nation to protest vaccine mandates. In the southeast, crowds were fired up with Pauline Hanson taking the stage.
On the glitter strip, stripped freedoms was their cry. Thousands gathered in Broadbeach, protesting vaccines and railing against government mandates.
Your body, your choice sort of thing, pretty much.
The Millions March, more of a family affair, with prams almost outnumbering placards.
For me, it's about standing up now before it ends up mandates to my children.
A similar message flying overhead. On stage, Pauline Hanson got the crowd going. After failing to introduce federal legislation earlier this week preventing mandatory vaccines.
I will not give up. I intend to put that back on the floor of Parliament next week.
Out west in Toowoomba, it was more of a sit-in than a march, while at Cotton Tree on the Sunshine Coast, live music kept everyone entertained. Even though the crowd size has changed, one common theme remains, and that's towards the media, branded fake news and urged to tell the truth.
Why don't you research all the virologists that are telling the truth?
Where can I find them?
Online, have a look.
Further south, rain didn't dampen spirits in Sydney.
The whole thing's a scam as far as I'm concerned.
While in Melbourne, anger continued to be directed at Premier Daniel Andrews.
I just believe we should be able to live with freedom the way we always have.
Passionate pleas as the pandemic and politics continue to merge. Elliot Chipper, 7 News.
Dave Sharma, how difficult do you think it will be for an individual to launch defamation action against a tech giant in order to unmask someone online? Because that's, the end point of this legislation, that's what could happen. And while it could be funded by the taxpayer, that still could be a very big action for an ordinary person to take.
Look, it could be, and I think that's why the Prime Minister outlined today possible government support. But I think once we introduce these laws and change these laws, what it does is it changes the norms, and social media companies will now be treated effectively as publishers, which means they'll know they'll need to take responsibility for online content, and hence you'll expect their editorial team, their legal team and all these other people will now be involved in scrubbing off content that falls foul of the law, just as they do for radical incitement comment or highly anti-Semitic content. They do that now already. They do scrub their platforms, and this will just give them something else to look at. So it would be my hope that perhaps there'll need to be 1 or 2 test cases launched to test this legislation. But my hope will be that the social media companies will quickly clean up their act and start doing the right thing here by the community and by the community standards we've got.
Some of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's soldiers are now prisoners of war, and the Tigrayans have been parading them before the cameras. The presidents of Kenya and South Africa say all parties must commit to ending the violence.
We expressed our conviction that there is scope for dialogue amongst the warring parties in Ethiopia, and that there is an urgent need for all parties to the conflict to commit to an immediate, indefinite, and negotiated ceasefire and an all-inclusive political dialogue.
As the war draws closer to the Ethiopian capital, plans to defend Addis Ababa are intensifying. These women have joined a neighbourhood protection force to guard against advancing rebel forces. They've set up roadblocks, are searching vehicles for weapons, and are checking people's documents.
We women believe that random security checks on passers-by are very important. We also encourage others to do the same, because when we do this, we have no doubt that strangers will be caught.
Abiy has informed the nation that he's going to the front line, where he'll personally lead the army, and he's asked Ethiopians to join him in what he calls the battle to save the nation. The US is calling the military escalation alarming and says it threatens any diplomatic progress between the government and Tigrayan forces.
Addis is under great threat, and it also means that there's likely to be considerably more suffering, and people should leave now to avoid the worst possible scenario, which could be rebel forces entering Addis, or starvation or deprivation.
Germany and France have joined the US in urging their citizens to leave Ethiopia, while the UN says it's temporarily relocating the families of its staff. Meanwhile, more than 2 million Ethiopians have now fled their homes, with reports of human rights abuses on both sides, and 7 million people are in need of food aid. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
In the face of the military situation in Ethiopia, the French embassy has asked all French citizens to leave without delay. There were a little over 1,000 French citizens in Ethiopia, but a lot of them had already decided to leave over the past weeks. The evacuation will be organized through the embassy itself. For now, the international airport is still functioning normally, with daily flights announced from Addis Ababa to Paris. This decision by the French embassy comes as several other countries, including the United States and the UK, had already asked their citizens to leave as the security situation deteriorates in the country. The UN is also evacuating family members of their international staff. So far, Tigrayan rebels are still fighting about 190 kilometers northeast of the capital. They've expressed their intention to advance until Addis Ababa in order to break the humanitarian siege imposed on Tigray, where hundreds of thousands are facing famine, according to the UN. Over the past days, Tigrayan rebels and their allies, the Oromo Liberation Army, have advanced towards Addis Ababa. They took over the town of Shewarobit and are now fighting for Debre Sina, located in a very mountainous area. This is a difficult battlefield and therefore a very strategic location. The Addis Ababa city administration on Tuesday said the capital was in a state of reliable peace. The Ethiopian government assures Tigrayan troops will be defeated. The government is still calling citizens to join the fight against Tigrayan forces. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said on Monday he will leave to the battlefield to lead the Ethiopian army troops to victory.
The southern city of Bengaluru has received more than 400 times the amount of rain it usually does in November. Flooding has led to the deaths of at least 24 people in the state of Karnataka, and thousands have been stranded. Emergency workers are using boats to rescue people from their homes.
Sir, from last 15 days continuous raining is there. Heavy raining is from last 3 days, continuous rain. Now we are having nearly 8 blocks we are having. 603 flats were there. Nearly 3,000 people we are living here.
In other parts of Bengaluru, many can't get into their homes.
We can't go inside the house and there's too much water in front of it. All the groceries are inside and we've been outside the house since last night.
Many people are concerned there could be more flooding as several lakes are overflowing.
It's been more than 12 years since the lake became full, and this is the first time it's been overloaded, and the drains have become blocked. Now water is overflowing, and it has rained very heavily too.
The states of Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Puducherry are also badly affected. Dozens of people, including rescue workers, have died in Andhra Pradesh, where the Indian Air Force is airlifting people to safety. Many parts of southern India are experiencing excessive rainfall. Environmentalists say unpredictable and extreme weather across South Asia is being driven by climate change and made worse by deforestation, the construction of dams, and excessive development. While the rain has eased in the worst affected state, Andhra Pradesh, people in Tamil Nadu are preparing for more heavy downpours. Elizabeth Puranam, Al Jazeera, New Delhi.
Vital supplies have been flown into Gunnedah, west of Tamworth, with residents stuck in the middle of a flood not seen in half a century. There are similar scenes across the state, and the message is the floodwaters are here to stay.
It's been nearly 50 years since Gunnedah has seen water like this. The swollen Namoy River creeping into streets and homes, the town's showground more of a muddied pool.
Hope the tennis courts are okay. It's a pretty busy part of the town normally.
Water levels peaked at 8.61 metres late this morning, the highest since 1974. Jason Wheeler and his children were forced to abandon their home and head for higher ground.
I've got another car, camper van, kids stuff.
Memories.
Memories. My wedding stuff, I get married next year.
With roads cut off, supplies were flown in to isolated properties. For some locals, though, the food found them. SES volunteers carried out 12 flood rescues in the past 24 hours.
How you going, mate? You all right? Yep, okay.
Hay boated out to these cows seeking refuge on the Boston Street Bridge near Boggabri. Just one task, keeping crews moving.
Some of those flood rescues over the whole event have been people driving into floodwaters.
South in Singleton, residents great and small escaped the worst of the wet. This afternoon, 700 locals forced to evacuate low-lying areas overnight were given the all clear. The fast-flowing Hunter River peaked at 12.7 metres, enough to fill the local footy oval, but failing to hit the 13-metre mark first predicted. The water now flowing towards Maitland. Minor flooding is expected around the town tomorrow.
All our dams are full and some are on white alert. That means they're going up to capacity.
Burrendong in the central west sitting at a whopping 146%, today bursting at the seams. Warragamba also putting on its own water show. Downstream in the Hawkesbury Nepean Valley, SES crews are on high alert. The river level has already risen by 2.6 metres here in Freeman's Reach since water started spilling out of the dam. At the moment there is no threat to property, but that could change if more rain is forecast.
Within 24 hours we can go from this level here to plus 2.6 to a 6 or 8 metre flood.
As new storms bear down on the coast and repairing from last week's storm damage continues, a crucial section of Highway 1, Chilliwack to Abbotsford, is open again.
I want to emphasize that while having the main artery open through the Fraser Valley is good news, it will not be travel as normal. Rather, it will be slow going with reduced speed limits, and people will again ask to be patient.
For those wanting to use the Coquihalla, very patient. The best case scenario, just to get commercial vehicles traveling Highway 5 again, is the end of January.
I do have to caution that the weather will be a factor and a key consideration in determining whether we can reach that target.
And there's no estimation at all yet when passenger vehicles will be able to use that highway again. A number of bridges damaged or destroyed.
We've never seen anything like this in BC in terms of how many highways have been impacted all at once. We have 200 sites across the South Coast and interior that were impacted.
Highway 8 near Spence's Bridge, damage extensive, the community cut off.
There have been airdrops of food going in. There have been initiatives to use forest roads to provide access.
The extent of agricultural damage becoming clear. 57 blueberry farms, that's about 2,100 acres, destroyed. Hundreds of acres of field vegetables, that's 4,000 tons gone.
Cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, carrots, and leeks have been significantly impacted.
The tally of animals that perished will have to wait.
Each time we update those numbers, it turns out to be another traumatic moment for our livestock producers. And to tell you the truth, they don't really want to go there right now.
She says they are still in the emergency. Discussions continue about how to deal with the animals' remains. And now, 3 more storms. One today, one on the weekend.
It is the one after that for next Tuesday, which is coming out of the Philippines. It is that far out in the Pacific, but it is also the most significant of the 3 events.
And that one causing the most concern. The focus, protecting areas already waterlogged and with dikes under pressure.
Not only are the crews there, but the equipment, the sandbags, of which I think about 2 million are in place to be able to deal with the weather events that we're seeing.
He's asking everyone prepare for the weather, update your emergency supplies, be aware of forecasts and road conditions.
If you don't need to travel during stormy weather, please stay home.
In Victoria, Lisa Yuzda. The latest update on BC's repair and recovery from last week's storm, a tale of fits and starts.
We preemptively closed Highway 3. It had been open for about 72 hours.
And then, just an hour later, that stretch between Hope and Princeton open again, slow going and essential traffic only.
This was done out of an abundance of caution and safety after visual inspection revealed that there were tension cracks in one of the eastbound lanes.
Some good news from CP when it comes to getting rail lines running again.
Cautiously optimistic, it can restart operations tomorrow evening, barring any unforeseen events. So they are making tremendous progress on repairing track.
Again, connecting the coast with the rest of Canada. The Trans Mountain pipeline, shut down a week ago Sunday, could be back online by the end of the week. Until then, the province bolstering ongoing limited gas supplies from elsewhere.
Alberta, for example, and then also from south of the border. I can tell you that there are some barges that are actually on the way to get here.
The crucial Coquihalla Connector, a long-term project done in weeks and months.
While plans are also being prepared for permanent rebuilds at multiple sites, we don't yet have clear timelines there beyond many weeks for the temporary work and many, many months for the permanent repairs.
A lot of time and money.
No doubt that this is going to be incredibly expensive, and the devastation is significant. We've all seen pictures, we've seen the impacts, and we know that this is going to be very costly for sure.
While many roads are out, there have been massive efforts to save animals stranded in the Fraser Valley.
Horses were found to have no food and water. They had no shelter. They were sedated. They were put into feed bags and they were helicoptered out of that area. And from all reports, they're doing well.
But many animals have perished, and she says plans for handling the remains still underway. Financial aid for homes and farms destroyed still being assessed. And for those whose jobs have been upended by the storms, the province asking the feds for time.
They are waiving normal employment insurance rules for British Columbians left without work due to the floods. And we're now asking for the 1-week waiting period to be waived as well.
As the recovery and rebuilding continues, still bracing for what weather may be coming next.
We are expecting another rain event this Wednesday through Friday, and a series of further storms are expected in the coming weeks.
In Victoria, Lisa Yuzda, City News.